In some interesting sense, that song actually speaks to the topic, essentially asking God to come and fight for us.
Big time. Not just fight for us, big time. We need it. Well, it was a somber evening on Monday following the attack on the train conveying passengers from Abuja to Kaduna. You will recall that the tracks were bombed on Monday and people were killed, people were injured, people were abducted. And you begin to wonder what is going on. If you juxtapose this beside the earlier attack, I think it was last weekend, when the airport in Kaduna as well was attacked and the plane was prevented from taking off. Questions begin to just play on your mind. So, are our security agents overwhelmed by all this that's going on? Well, we'll be asking the experts this morning, and we have two of them with us, security experts. Otumba Comrade Oladende Ario is here with us in our studio in Lagos. Good morning.
Good morning, my sister.
Comrade. And Pastor Laddie Thompson joins us via Zoom from Canada. Hello, Pastor Laddie. When are you coming back?
Well, I'm going to conclude my assignment here. I'll be back shortly. But it's lovely to hear you. Yes.
Thank you very much for joining us. So, Comrade, what do you think this is all about? Airport, rail tracks, and you can't even venture going by road. What do you think all this focus on transportation is all about?
Well, Kaduna used to represent the home of our military prowess. We had the NDA there, we had the mechanized division there, several other security-related organizations were in Kaduna. And then when you think of Kaduna in the 60s, 70s, 80s, it was the safest place you could be. But suddenly, the narrative started changing to the point that when I heard on Sunday that the airport was attacked, I wasn't surprised. Because NDA, our premier military training institution, was so violated last year. So if that could happen, and then I don't think there's anybody that is serving time now for that. There was no foreclosure, no conclusion. So, if anything that happens again, I won't be surprised. It's the same crowd that's still on the prowl. Now, Sunday happened, planes were stopped from flying, and of course, from landing too. And then on Monday, the Abuja-Kaduna rail line has become an easy pick for these criminals. The Monday event wasn't the first one. We've had several. And the thinking was that, okay, since the road was no longer safe, they could be going via the train. But repeatedly, we've experienced attacks on the train. And you would have expected government now to be purposeful in bringing up a solution. It became very painful when the Minister of Transportation came up and said he wrote a memo requesting for 3.7 billion naira, to install gadgets and all of that. But when I read the memo, from within the government, saying that the company that he put forward for that contract had a turnover of about 80 million naira, and there was no record of prior capacity where they are delivered on such a job. Now, you begin to ask yourself, what kind of characters do we have in government? Yes, well, you could have written a memo, but if there was a transparency, it would have scaled through.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, lives have been lost, people have been made. The one that paid me particularly is the lady doctor that was murdered, and the lawyer too, and the TUC man. We used to roll together in Abuja in my days at the Labour office. Now they are all gone. And very painfully too, these criminals went to the first-class cabin, harvesting people and taking them into the forest. And up till now, none has been discovered. Unfortunately, the happening also reflected the level of corruption with ticketing at the NRC. And this is a project that we borrowed humongous money to finance, hoping to pay back over time. Everything summarized presents a dysfunctional society.
Well, Pastor Thompson, you've been talking about this for years. I'm almost certain that there is a perspective to this issue that we're not looking at yet.
I think you may be right. First of all, I think our hearts must go out to the families that have lost children and parents and wives and all that. Then, as we do that, we want to remember again that this is just an addition to the statistics of what has been going on over more than 10, 12 years. It's just increasing. So if you ask me, at this point in time, if we want to look at the Abuja-Kaduna incidents, we need to adopt the policy of tragic optimism. I've mentioned this before in a prior interview, that this should be our policy right now in Nigeria. Tragic optimism, they say, is just a search for meaning when the inevitable tragedies of life show up. And what tragic optimism does is that it doesn't allow us to be so covered with sorrow that we are useless. And it doesn't allow us, again, on the other hand, to go to the other extreme, which is to start, talking positively without any reason behind. Tragic optimism allows us at a time like this as a nation to look at the pain that we are going through and use it as an opportunity to bring forth a testimony through that. It allows us to look at the fact that a lot of guilt, people are introspecting all over the whole place. And out of this guilt, we should be able to improve as a nation. And finally, when you look at the wanton loss of lives, indiscriminate way, which is just symptomatic of the war form that is attacking us, we would also agree that this might just be an opportunity for us to become decisive enough to take the actions that we refuse to take all along. So if you ask me, the tragedy is just symptomatic. It's like a medical doctor, we've told you before, we are entering the final phases of what has come against Nigeria. And the best way we can move forward from this, if we assess it and take up tragic optimism, what I'm going to tell you now is this. We need to take decisive actions now. And I will tell you what will help us to make those decisive actions if Nigeria is to win this war. Right now, we are at 51-49. Right now, before we had better chances, but the chances are dwindling as the time frame is reducing. So what should we do? I think what we need to do in Nigeria right now, looking at the security architecture, the country itself, and everybody involved, is what they call the mathematization of reality. That is, we need to mathematize our inquiries. We need to dispassionately, at this point in time right now, devoid of emotions. We need to look at the trajectory of this Hydra that has been attacking Nigeria. We need to dispassionately, with digital accuracy, as it were, look at facts and figures so that we will not be confused. Now, what will this lead us to that can help us at a time like this, in Nigeria? One, we've said this for more than 10, 15 years, that any person who is a professional in this field who understands this new warfare knows that we are dealing with a Hydra, a shape-shifting Hydra, a Hydra that, makes use of terror in a clinical way to break the will of a nation so that a minority can impose its will on a majority. We are dealing with a Hydra that wears religion as a cloak. So that Hydra is what has struck again. It is very intelligent. It is purposive. Now, why is Kaduna State the one that is undergoing all these things? If we are going to be very true to ourselves and we intend to win this war, we need to find the courage and the boldness. Let's take a case study of what's going on in Kaduna State right now. I think there are a few people who need to be declared as persons of interest. We know it has been proven all over the world that this Hydra is opportunistic. It uses moles. It uses penetration within the structure of governance, the political structure. It's a Hydra to collapse the host nation from within. And what we are meant to do is that, listen, I've listened to a lot of people talking. There's nothing wrong with Nigeria's armed forces. There's nothing wrong with our security professionals. They are very good. There's nothing wrong with our people, even though we may have the challenges of corruption and all that. What we're facing here that can be isolated based on what happened in Kaduna, the Abuja Kaduna incident, is that we are actually dealing with moles in high places. What we're saying now is that somebody somewhere, a gang of people somewhere, are frustrating all the efforts of the president. They are frustrating all the efforts of the country. And we need to be decisive this time around to use this opportunity to insist on inquiry. Now, when I talk about persons of interest, I'll give an example. Now, it doesn't mean that these persons are guilty. It doesn't mean that all of them are moles who are cooperating. Some, unwittingly and unknowingly, maybe even doing things that are assisting this war form, asymmetrical war and hybrid threats, assisting it to take down the nation. I'll give you an example. There's an individual in Kaduna State, for instance, who should be declared a person of interest. In 2012, he released a tweet for the whole public and who was to see. In 2016, he made a comment. Not only a comment, he openly confessed that he had been in touch with some of the terrorists, all that, in terms of pacification and so on and so forth. And then again in 2019, was it 2019 February, on a live program on a national network in Nigeria, he made many comments that were unguarded. Now, why should such persons be declared as POIs? As a person of interest, especially for a person of the kind of caliber of position that he has, opportunistic nature of this threat will seize that opportunity to escalate. Now, let's not forget something again. A while ago, the government told us that based on something that information coming from the UAE, that there were at least 96 financiers of terrorism in Nigeria. Now, we did hear that they were going to be prosecuted. We heard that their names were going to be, made public. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that came out is that one of the greatest financiers of terror lives in Kaduna State, has lived in Kaduna State, has operated from there. So we need to understand that there must be something creating a very friendly atmosphere for operations within Kaduna State. And anybody who knows Nigeria's history will know that Kaduna State in Nigeria is the timepiece of Nigeria. Whichever way Kaduna goes, right from the days of God, whichever way Kaduna goes is the way Nigeria is going to go.
Just one thing, Pastor Thompson. I'd like you to follow up on something Comrade Ario said earlier about the fact that there have been attacks on some military infrastructure such as the NDA, and so far it would seem like nothing has been done, no follow-up. It would seem, according to, as far as he is concerned, no one has been called to question on that one. Is that a sign of weakness or of vulnerability playing out in our faces?
Not necessarily. I'll tell you why. The thing about terrorism is that it's a very, very insidious war form. Insidious because you have an enemy that really doesn't have a uniform, doesn't have any standard barracks, an enemy that has no rules of engagement. And when you face that kind of enemy, your thinking has to change. So oftentimes, if your thinking does not change to match, the African proverb says when the drum beat changes, your dance pattern must change. Now, you will discover that Nigeria's responses have been changing, but the changes have been too slow. And that alone can give us the pointer that the major problem really is not incompetence. The major problem is infiltration all hands, all if you concatenate right now and put together everything that's been going on, it doesn't point to incompetence. It doesn't, I mean, let's not deceive ourselves. Nigeria's got professionals that are very efficient. So the point really is that there is a fifth columnist. There's something disabling the effort of the government from inside the government.
Is this unknown to government?
Well, that again would be a question that would be better responded to by a representation from governance.
Okay, let's leave it.
Yeah.
Let's leave that at that for now. Well, comrade, there are those who, I mean, I don't know. First of all, do you want to say a thing or two about what you've heard Pastor Thompson say? Because there are those who also say, I mean, whatever you want to say in response to what he said, there are those who are, also looking at the failure of intelligence as a factor of, this occurrence back to back, almost over and over again.
Well, for every game plan, security game plan, strategy or architecture, the base is intelligence gathering. Is the foundation on which whatever you may intend to do, either to forestall or to counter or to stop any insurgency at any time. The question is, this year alone, the army got over 57 billion, is it billion naira or so? Okay, and consistently like that since 2019, it's been getting so much fund, a little bit of it which goes into capital and the bulk goes to recurrent. Now, if we say funding, they cannot come and claim that they are not properly funded because intelligence gathering requires funding. I'm not going to deny that. But we have hammered on this point over and over. So for me, it's we can begin to think and say, is the government complicit? Otherwise, some people should have had their day in court for dereliction of duty. But it's the same song we are singing every now this thing happens. And it's so bad that each time the president comes to speak, I see it as giving us what I call pro forma invoice. Without a naira in your pocket, you can walk into a place where they sell Rolls Royce, pretend you want to buy. They will receive you and immediately issue you with an invoice, okay? Hoping that one day you will come back. And you know that you just collecting that paper for fun. You've only had them for a game. And so, it doesn't carry any weight anymore. The state officers have been asked to do this, do that, and that. We've had this over and over. And for me, you can't be doing things the same way and expect a different result. Somebody calls that insanity.
Comrade, when the bandits attacked, or terrorists, or whatever you want to call them, they headed for the first-class coach.
They're not illiterates.
Doesn't that tell you something? And that has made some people begin to think that, the chicken has come home to roost.
Right.
The high and mighty are now being attacked. So it could be a minister's turn next time. It could be a governor's turn. So do you think that this will now propel the government to look at this issue more seriously?
Unfortunately,
because
I don't think so.
One or two governors have gone to see these guys and taken pictures with them that went viral. Another governor came out and said they know where these people are, and yet they have not taken the war to them. Do you think these kinds of things are now going to happen because it's becoming too close for comfort?
You see, the narratives that we've been given at one time or the other, they bear common sense. There was a photograph or a video of a governor with Nigerian soldiers visiting bandits.
Yes.
And they were carrying AK-47, ill-dressed, ragtag stuff. And there was exchange of cash in that video. And we were wondering, because what they were doing, which we spoke against, was empowerment. You were empowering them, giving them more money to be able to be better armed. And we condemned it, but they said no, it's the best option. Now, how far has that taken us? The first governor to admit that he was paying terrorists was the same El Rufai, and at that time we didn't find it funny. At a point when he knew that supposed solution had failed, he stopped and he told them they would not pay. When they were picking children from schools, he promised to leave his child in public school. Of course, the intensity became so much that he had to have a rethink. The last time he spoke, which was yesterday, he was threatening that if federal government would not do something decisive about this case, it would be going to hire foreign mercenaries. And that brings to question, are we still one united, indivisible Nigeria? Things have gotten to a point where a governor is being made to think, look, I must protect my state. It's my territory. I've been elected to protect them. And constitutionally, that is his primary responsibility. They had gone for the governor of Benue State. They had gone for another governor, but they went on a visitation to an attack place, and on their way back,
Borno State.
So many security men were wasted by bandits. You begin to ask yourself, how come they seem to have superior firepower over
and information?
And information, because they know who goes where.
Yeah.
It goes to the question that I asked about intelligence.
Yeah, that means they spend more, or rather, they are much more committed to intelligence gathering, making their operation seamless, successful. Whereas for us, the reverse is the case. They went to the first-class cabin, they were harvesting people. Those who they saw were too weak or too old to follow them, they wasted them and took the rest away. As we said, perhaps the willpower now that is lacking for government to be more decisive and be deliberate and confront this case. We've spent a lot of Commonwealth in the last 10, 20 years or so on terrorism, which has impacted very negatively on the amount of money we now have to develop the nation. The last 2 months, everywhere all over, it's been one problem or the other. No diesel, no petrol, bad fuel, non-spec. And now darkness has also followed. So much that
System
the
failure.
people who are the bakers are saying they will no longer be able to bake bread. Why? The cost of diesel has thrown up their cost, and people now won't be able to afford their products.
And the cost of flour.
Of course.
One loaf of bread is 900 naira.
Unfortunately, again, the same attacks, this insecurity, has taken the farmers out of the farms, especially those who were into wheat production. We no longer can produce enough wheat, at least to supplement the importation. Flying again has become a high-cost joke. The other day, they said Lagos to Abuja, they will be charging between 100 and 120K. I remember going to Abuja with a 5,000 naira ticket. And everything is just going out of hand. And you begin to ask yourself, do we really have a government in place?
Okay. Well, Pastor Thompson, it wasn't only the governor of Kaduna State that has said something that many people will put question marks on. The majority leader of the House of Representatives also said something almost as combustible, that Nigerians should be allowed to bear arms in self-defense. Well, the mere thought of it, scares me. I don't know what you think of that. Or along with whatever other solutions that people may be adopting to protect themselves first.
Well, let's again be very, very careful, because you are dealing with a very intelligent Hydra. And when we say Hydra, it means that it has tentacles in everything from governance to justice to the military to religion. And one of the objectives it has is to turn the people against each other to facilitate its objectives. And that's why you find out that sometimes we have to be very deliberate and purposive in every decision we take if we plan to win this war, because we are at war. First of all, for the governor of Kaduna State, he needs to be declared as a person of interest, not because he's guilty, but so that there can come an understanding that there are certain positions somebody can have that will make you complicit, even unknowingly. Now, that is not to also prejudge to say that it's impossible that his hands may be found to be, in the pot, deliberately. Now, having said that, everything that Comrade has said, I think, is very, very interesting and very poignant. But the point still is this: no matter how efficient your information gathering is, this warhead, this war form, uses moles in high places from within the system. So you see, no matter how good you are, as long as you have within your ranks, you have not cleansed your stables, and these moles are practically we've allowed them to infiltrate. Don't forget that the former president of Nigeria, before the incumbent president, did say that even in his own cabinet at that time, they were already there. So if we really want to get a hold of this thing, everything happening so far shows us that we are dealing with something intelligent. Going for the first class cabin is typical of the kind of instructions that come from ISWAP, not from Boko Haram. Don't forget that it's still a war of narratives, and that the amplification of fear across the nation is part of what they want to make all of us fight each other. They have studied all our fault lines, they're exploiting that. So if we don't want to lose, let me say something to your last comment, which we need to be very careful about. There was a time some years ago when I spoke about interagency cooperation in some of your interviews. There was a time when I spoke about defense structures, intelligence gathering and all that. Then if you remember, as time went on, I began to talk about regional structures. And after we saw the way regional structures were put up, we discovered that it was not going to work, confirming again that we have many persons of interest all over the country who are working against the country, some knowingly, some unknowingly. Now, do you believe this, that if this thing continues, we will get to a point when the only solution that the nation will have, which is what you said is a nightmare, the only last resort, if this thing goes beyond, see, there's going to come a time it's going to disrupt air travel, they're going to disrupt road travel beyond Abuja, Kaduna. I'm talking about across the entire nation. By that time they're getting to those points and to those levels, trust me, we will come to a place where the only way we'll be able to withstand this thing is to bring it down, not just the regional level now, down to the individual level. And we are now talking gun control. Because if you imagine that on that Kaduna Abuja train, if some persons there had permits and they were carrying guns, I doubt if the outcome would have been the way it is. Now, it's a nightmare to try to imagine that, but the alternative, if we are allowed to get to that point. So I guess what we need to do is this. I think we need to push it as a political point. I think the polity of the country needs to get together and begin to let government know that in the event of these continuous breaches, in the event that we don't have the POIs, persons of interest, rooted out so that your policies can work, in that event, we will have to empower individuals, which is give gun permits to people.
Well, Pastor Thompson,
Now,
just 1 second on that one. Is it right now? It would seem like the entire security apparatus is centralized, not decentralized. Even the regional thing that you talked about, I don't know, if it wasn't also centralized, the command and control wasn't centralized. So does it in any way validate that campaign for state police? That maybe if state governments were in charge of their own security, it could, help to deal with the issue?
well, let's again keep a very clear head in thinking these things through, because we want to make sure that this is strategic, not just a political issue. Now, the point I'm trying to raise to you is this. Before we get to that point, we must first of all consider the issue that it could just be a handful of people, persons of interest, who are disabling. I mean, can you imagine you're in a home, you lock up the house, put up your securities, Somebody gets up at midnight to go and open up your windows, open up your gates, disables all your security. No matter how many millions you spend, no matter how central, local, or global your security is, as long as you have moles, persons of interest within your structures, and you have not rooted them out, things will keep going south. So when it comes to regional, the political issue, I think this is how we need to play it. Strategically speaking, the political class needs to understand that if they don't wake up to what is going on in Nigeria right now, there will be no politics to participate. If this thing out to keep going on the way it's going on, there will be no politics for anybody to partake with. Therefore, the political class has to put on their thinking cap while this lasts to realize that if the abuses of regional structure is one of the reasons why the government cannot go in that direction, they need to come up with a unified voice so that we can be assured that if we go in that direction, it will be to localize responses and to increase, the response time to this issue. But trust me, I can assure you that this is not what is going on. What is going on here is that they have had more than 15 to 18 years to put people in different places of governance and high places in business and all that. And they are the people. Why do you think we had a policy, certain policies we don't understand? Why do you think for a long time we could not call a spade a spade? Why do you think we are confusing and what was terrorism, we were confusing it with an insurgency? These are two different things. It was a war of narratives. So even before the country realized it, the war of narratives was on. The war has been going on in different sectors to try and divide, to try and make us lose faith in governance. Now, why don't we weed out that minority that are being used so that we can unify the country and win this war, as opposed to deepening the quagmire by fouling political waters? So if we stick to the fact that we have 5 existential threats, and the major one is this intelligent Hydra, I believe that the nation will sit up. The late Enna Ikumu used to be a regular guest on your programs. And I remember that one or two things he said, when he talked about desensitization of the polity. Now, a lot of the things that he mentioned then are not even being done. And if they're being done, they are being disabled. So why don't we look at the fact that, look, let us wake up and smell the coffee. There are people disabling whatever government is doing. There are people disabling what the army is doing. There are people disabling what the security services are doing. Whoever they are, they must be weeded out, because if we don't weed them out, they will ultimately succeed.
Comrade.
Well, for me, I will never support a situation where everyone will be allowed to carry arms, as you asked earlier. Number 2, the issue of state police. There was a state, I can't remember the name, they hired sportsmen for a festival. They trained them and catered them, and then they went for the festival. When they came back, they couldn't pay them for their performances. And I asked myself, this particular state was at the forefront of requesting for state police. Can you imagine if that state had the go-ahead to hire able-bodied men and women, train them, keep them, including arming them, and then it comes for some sort of salary payment, and they could not pay? They will have unleashed unimaginable mayhem on the population. So our economy is in a situation where it can no longer accommodate state police, whether we like it or not.
Are you by any chance also saying that the state of the economy is also responsible for making our security vulnerable?
It cannot be taken to be too far from it. More jobs have been lost, more companies have closed down, meaning more people have left employment brackets. So we now have a larger army of employable, skilled, trained people who are no longer employed. Unfortunately, they must survive. When that means survive, if it's just to eat and drink water, they need money to achieve all of that. And that should tell you where we are now, that people are ready to do just anything to make money. I'm not talking of those who are looking for money to buy jets, or no, just to survive. And that's why you see so many people improvising, going into Yahoo rituals here and there, people getting kidnapped. I mean, organ harvesting is now a rising trade in Nigeria because people want to survive. But you see, at the end of it all, we cannot but put the blame at the feet of the federal government because they hold all the aces, they manage our resources, they distribute as they like. That's where the power is. People are saying we should decentralize, but it's also a process. It's not an event. And in doing that, you must be very careful so that you will not end up jumping from fry pan and find yourself in the fire pot.
And Comrade Festus Akimboyewa seems to agree with you there, because he says if the road is not safe, the railway is not safe, the airport is not safe, how would Nigerians and visitors move about? These incessant terrorist attacks on hapless people is a chronic problem. The question is why the federal government is not taking drastic action to solve it. He agrees with you that it is squarely in the
Absolutely.
hands of the federal government. And they don't seem to be doing much about it.
The state governors...
The people are not feeling the much that they're doing.
The state governors...
people are being killed every day.
That was erroneously, now I would say, clothed in the garment of chief security officers. They control or command no troops. Before a state governor can instruct the commissioner of police of the state to take any action, the CP will have to refer to some AIG, DIG somewhere, and of course, the IG. Now, and time, you know, is a critical element in security.
Now, you've on the one hand, you say that there are some states that cannot afford to pay for it, and at the same time, those states are vulnerable to security. So what do we do?
Well, the federal government that still has all the aces should wake up, be more decisive as against what we have. Then we have also promoted no consequence environment.
When you say decisive, what do you mean?
They should rejig the intelligence gathering. That's the bedrock of security policies. If they can get it right from there, they will forestall, stop in the track, and mitigate against so many of these attacks we are getting.
What if
and whoever gets arrested should be so punished.
What if those, intelligence gathering, raises the questions around the POIs that Pastor Thompson talked about the other time? These people who some may think are untouchable. What happens in that regard?
The case of people of interest has been there since time immemorial. If you remember, we used to have what they called Kaduna Mafia that held so much power and were influencing appointments, political election and everything all over the country. But the way we are now, such people, whether they no longer exist or not, I don't know. But if they exist and all of these evils are still trailing us, maybe they should be questioned. I will not forget General T.Y. Danjuma when he said there's a plan to either do ethnic cleansing or Islamize people or whatever. Whether it's right or not, I don't want to go that route. But the point is, everything that we are seeing is indicating that the government is not deliberate in tackling insecurity. Okay. And the people are becoming bolder by the day.
Pastor Thompson, Festus again says, what's the benefit of linking our phone lines to our NIN when terrorists are still calling the families of abducted people boldly without security agencies apprehending them? I'd like your comment on that.
Now, again, we are becoming more, we're getting sharper in our vision. Let me extend it like this. First of all, some years ago in Plateau State, there was a commissioner of police. There was a terrorist attack. The commissioner of police was complicit. He was found to be complicit, but he was not sacked. He later went on to become the Inspector General of Police for Nigeria. Now, imagine what one person of interest, POI, can do So when we talk about POIs, we're not talking about Adnan Mafia or politicians. We're talking about moles. We're talking about people who are part of terror intelligentsia, people who are cooperating. And you see, no matter how, I'm very careful. I'm going to tell you why I'm being very careful. Until we have another form of governance, we cannot create a state of anomy by allowing the people to work contrary to government. The best course of action, listen, I have seen more than enough bloodshed directly. I've seen families suffer in that country. And I tell you something that wisdom has still got to prevail in solving the problem if we are not going to lose completely to this minority who are outthinking us at every turn. So to that, I think what we need to establish clearly, again, is that one person of interest, I'll give you a separate example, maybe you understand what I'm saying. Even in the army in those days, the boys in the front, they would locate Boko Haram sites, installations.
Pastor Thompson, you only have 30 seconds to conclude your thoughts.
Well, okay, let me just put it like this. Now that we are thinking sharp, we need to use everything we have in Nigeria to pressure the government. Everything rises and falls with leadership. Without destabilizing the country, we must pressure the government to look into these issues of persons of interest and remove them from their positions of influence, like the one you just mentioned right now, linking our force with terrorists, and still allowing a young man like that Pantani, who has known terrorist sites, to continue to serve in the government when our children's future and our grandchildren's future is at stake. That is my take. Until we face these issues squarely and deal with persons of interest, when they are cleared that they are not terrorists, then we can continue to have them in office.
Okay.
But to have them in office and complicit is not going to work for the future of the nation.
Pastor Laddie Thompson, a security consultant who joined us via Zoom from, well, it seems to be his base now in Vancouver. We also had in the studio Comrade Olade in the area. Comrade Otumba, the whole works. He was with us in our studio in Lagos. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us and sharing your insights with us this morning. Sunrise will return in just a moment. Do stay with us.